Welcome back, guys. This is Chad. We have another podcast episode for you today, and we have a guest you should all be very familiar with. Go ahead and reintroduce yourself.
Hey everybody, this is Ferris again.
And we have another topic today, pretty serious topic to talk about. There will be several people discussed in this who went through a traumatic event and had responses to that trauma, as well as several people who passed. And we do have thoughts and prayers with all the people and all the families of those who passed. So today, the topic of discussion is going to be the two most recent plane crashes that have gone somewhat viral on the internet and in mainstream news. One in South Korea, one in Azerbaijan. The one in Azerbaijan had a lower total death count. It's still being calculated how many people passed. In South Korea, the number is pretty consistently set at 179 people who died in the event of this tragic plane crash. Both of the planes were Boeings, so we will be discussing the relationship between the company of Boeing cutting corners and creating planes that have a lot of malfunctions and a lot of things that go wrong with them that can cause tragic events like this, as well as just some of the responses from people involved in the situation. Ferris has seen some of the videos and some of the interviews done with people who were on these planes as they crashed, and he's got a little bit more understanding of the situation. So I'm going to let him take over and give you guys a rundown on the first crash right now.
So, first thing I want to say is, I hope everybody's had a good week, and let's go deep dive into the topic. So, there was two crashes. I saw a video specifically more so for the Azerbaijan one, and I saw like two ones that got viral, especially on X. One of them was like somebody recording the flight while it's about to crash, and like you see people in there like screaming and all that, and then you see one older guy who's making a prayer. And then I saw another video. It's after the crash, and then it's the same old guy that was making the prayer out up outside of the airplane. He's still hurt and stuff like that a little bit, but he's not dead. He's not like severely injured at all, too. But it was just a miracle for him, I'll tell you that. So just seeing that is just insane to me. And then the South Korean video I saw was specifically like how the flight was about to go up and they just went through that wall and just blew up. And so many people died. But while I did some research recently, says Azerbaijan says plane hit by external interference over Russia before crash. Some saying it was shot at from Russia too.
Absolutely, and
So
the interesting thing
it's looking bad.
the interesting thing I noticed in particular about the Russian claims on this are that Vladimir Putin himself personally apologized for the fact that the crashes happened, but also denied that Russia did it. So it's kind of a weird situation there, self contradictory, where he apologized. He said it's a tragedy, things like that. Should have never happened. It's unfortunate the way it went down, but he also denied that it was Russia that did it. The president of Azerbaijan is fairly convinced, though, that it was Russia that interfered in this and that shot the plane down. So that one, a little less to do with the fact that it was a Boeing and a little more to the fact to do that the world's becoming a dangerous place and a lot of dangerous things can happen. People can be hurt in the crossfire between conflicts that have nothing to do with them. So we're seeing that. I mean, in the Azerbaijan case, I was flying to the North Caucasus region, which is inside Russia's territory, technically speaking. There were a lot of people on the flight from Kazakhstan, though, from what I understand. A lot of Kazakhs who the entire demographic situation in the former Soviet Union and all those states that make up the territory that used to all belong to the Soviet Union is complicated. There's a lot of ethnic Russians who live in Kazakhstan. There's a lot of ethnic Kazakhs who live in Russia. So, in general, it's kind of an interesting situation. The breakdown of an empire leads to things like that. But the fact that this is believed to be, and I think the evidence is pretty solid, especially considering Vladimir Putin apologized for it, even though he denied it. I think there's pretty solid evidence here that this is related to Russian air defense systems shooting
Hmm.
down planes, commercial flights even. This that in combination with the attacks that Ukraine has been doing onto Russian territory that is not alongside the front, not in the war zone, just shows that a lot more people who don't consider themselves to be directly involved in this war and who really are not gonna be feeling the ramifications of that pretty soon. In addition, we have the South Korean flight, the one Ferris discussed, that ran to the wall. That one was a malfunction in the flight itself, in the Boeing flight. Some of you, when you hear the name Boeing, the first thing you're going to think of is the assassinated whistleblowers. They went pretty
Hmm.
viral earlier this year and last year. For there were several different whistleblowers who said that Boeing was cutting corners, that management was telling their engineers and their mechanics to reuse certain parts, to use cheaper parts, to go without parts if they felt they could. Try to save money, save costs as much as they could, and that led to a lot of malfunctioning planes, a lot of recalls. There were huge recalls on the 747s for the past few years because of several issues. And for some reason, every internal whistleblower who came out and was willing to go to trial against Boeing for this committed suicide randomly. Even ones who had left specific notice with their family saying, "I will never commit suicide. If I die, it's because they killed me." They just turned up the next few days dead of apparent suicide. So, real sketchy situation going on there with Boeing, a country with heavy, heavy ties to the military industrial complex. They've got a lot of contracts with the government to produce military weaponry and all sorts of things for the militaries of the U.S. and a few other countries in NATO. And just in general, it was a really sketchy situation, and I think we're starting to see some of the ramifications of what those whistleblowers are talking about. Any thoughts you want to add, Ferris?
Just just the main thought I keep thinking about is the assassinations aspect, and then that means how much power they have, even in the United States. Um, it's kind of scary because the way they kind of operate is kind of like a mob, if you can kind of say. And like when I did some, yeah, when I did some research on it, it's also part of Boeing. Technically, is part of the military industrial complex too. So it's a lot of sketchy things going on with them specifically. So I'm not a big trustworthy of Boeing. I don't like being in Boeing flights, specifically from hearing all the news of them cutting corners. I think there should be a lot of like arrests towards them. But of course, when you're that big and there's not many. If you think about it, there's not really many like flight manufacturers. What is it? Boeing, Airbus. For the United States, I believe what is it only Boeing?
No, there's
I know Airbus is French. I know that for sure.
that's a good
I don't
question.
there's not many. So from what I'm heard,
So there's
like
Boeing,
mhm.
Airbus, Lockheed Martin produces Gulfstream, also produces aircraft. Cessna still in production. Northrop Grumman produces some. There's a few in America though. I think Cessna is an American company, but let me double check that for you.
Gulfstream one, I've heard about that, but Gulfstream specifically, like I don't are you sure they make like regular aircrafts like for economic like regular citizens? Because usually from what I hear about Gulfstreams, it's mainly like it's like private jets.
Yeah, well, it says. Let me take a look here. Yeah, so it looks like they only sell them for business jets. So, like you said, they only make private aircraft. So for commercial flights, you're right. Gulfstream is not a
Mhm.
manufacturer in that industry. Cessna would be from what I'm seeing, the second largest American-based aircraft manufacturer.
Yeah.
But like you said, Boeing is definitely number one. They're the big dog in terms of aircraft manufacturing in the United States.
It reminds me of a conversation I had with one of my friends when we talked about monopolies in the world, and we talked about Amazon specifically. But when he explained to me, like, nah, Amazon is not truly a monopoly like that. But he's like, if you look at the airlines, though, that's more so like a monopoly, specifically Boeing. They dominate the American market and a lot of the market around the world. And like France has like Airbus, which dominates some of the market around the world too. Um, just from you just naming those specific amount, because it's a very complex industry to get into and it's very expensive. He was explaining to me how other billionaires are trying to get into it, but it's hard to because of how competitive like it is with the big guys already got everything.
High barriers to
It's
entry.
say it again.
Very high barriers to entry. It's one of the
Yes,
industries hardest to get into for sure.
yes, by far. So, uh, it could be a pain. So that's why it's kind of like scary situations because they do all these things kind of bypass because they know they can kind of get away with it. specifically since everybody has their product, which is the Boeing,
Aircraft. Yeah.
the aircraft. Yeah.
It's the thing. A lot of economists theorize that aircraft manufacturers and airlines themselves, pretty much everything related to the aviation industry, is either a natural monopoly or a natural oligopoly. Oligopoly is similar to monopolies. It's just instead of one major player, you have two. The go-to example in a lot of economics classes is Coke and Pepsi. That is the soft drink oligopoly. You got either Coke products or you got Pepsi products,
Hmm.
and sometimes you have a third product that's like a weird, like Shasta or Dr Pepper. You have a weird product that exists outside of the main two, but for the most part, you know who the big dogs in the industry are. So, soft drinks and oligopoly, not as high of a barrier to entry in terms of creating one, but definitely a high barrier to entry in terms of creating the distribution network you need to succeed in that industry. In terms of aircraft, the barrier to entry is just having the resources to manufacture planes. Can you build a plane? And that takes a supply chain, a lot of resources, a lot of manpower, specialized skilled labor. It's pretty much impossible to get in. Another service that runs as sort of a natural oligopoly would be, or a natural monopoly even, would be service providers. So utilities, electricity, gas, utility providers. Those companies are natural monopolies, which is why there's often only one or two in a region.
Yeah,
There's
that's true.
there's various thoughts on how to deal with the oligopoly problem, the problem of naturally arising monopolies or naturally arising oligopolies. Aircraft is one of the ones. Aircraft control, for instance, aircraft control has to be a monopoly. You can't have multiple people saying, "Oh yeah, this air is clear," and they're not discussing with each other which flights are going to go which direction. You have to have
Hmm.
one central, cohesive hub to direct all the air traffic. Otherwise, it all just falls apart if multiple people
Agreed.
are doing things different ways. Aircraft manufacturing, it forms that way, seems to form that way naturally, but it's debatable whether or not it's best for society. The sort of good thing, I guess, if you're a consumer and not involved in the production side of things, if you have no relation to the manufacturers, either through owning stock or anything like that or working for them, is that there are other methods of transportation. Aviation's just, it's the big dog right now because it's the fastest. And oftentimes, it's not the cheapest, but it is the fastest. So if you have things that you need to do extremely quickly, transportation in terms of goods, services, or people, flight's the way you want to go. There are, of course, other options. There's naval. You can take a boat. You could still take a boat to other countries. You could probably take a boat from Europe to the U.S. to Africa. You could bounce all the way around if you really needed to. But in terms of domestic flights or domestic issues here within the United States, where I stay at, a plane's probably going to get you from the East Coast to the West Coast the fastest. There are some trains, but the railroad industry has been gutted here in the U.S. So it really is a nearly a monopoly on long range transportation, specifically for consumers, consumer long range transportation. So it's a naturally arising oligopoly because of the barriers to entry.
Hmm.
What the steps are to deal with that are questionable, especially now that Boeing has decided to operate as sort of a cartel. I mean, they've always been a cartel, the aircraft
Hmm.
manufacturing cartel, but they're less OPEC, less oil cartel, and more Mexican drug cartel style. They're assassinating people
Yeah.
who snitch on them, which is not the kind of company I want running one of the biggest, one of the most important
I say,
industries in America.
yeah, definitely the biggest airline craft industry in America, and the world probably actually. So seeing them being acting like that is a very scary thing, and
And it's even
that's
scarier.
where it's like I'm very much of the type of person that like maybe like government should let things away, keep away from a lot of things that we about us. But that's one thing I think they should intervene because that's not natural. That's not natural for it to happen. The issue is that because the reason where the government mainly is very quiet and all that is mainly because like that's where in the U.S. at least it's lobbyism, you know. So
So
that causes a lot of issue.
so I looked it up. The largest global aircraft manufacturer is Airbus. Boeing's number
Real,
three.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, Boeing's number three. Honeywell's number two. Raytheon is number four. Raytheon, I definitely know more for their military contracts and the things they do on that end, but I mean, who buys more planes than different militaries, especially the U.S. military? So that makes
Hmm.
sense. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot going on with that situation. The real issue isn't even their cartel behavior and their execution of snitches, though. It's really just the fact that they're cutting corners and they're not changing that behavior because we keep getting one new whistleblowers coming out every couple months. It seems like Boeing has a new person stepping out and saying, "Hey," even with the threat of death, which is crazy, with the fact that people keep coming up missing or coming up found and not alive. People still
Hmm.
come out and make statements against Boeing about what's going on, and I mean it's the right thing to do. If I was in that
Yeah.
situation, I'm not going to say I would do it because unfortunately I do value my life a lot, but
Yeah.
I respect the people who do it because we get situations like what happened in South Korea, where one issue in the manufacturing of this plane led to the deaths of 179 people, and it even led to some other damages. I mean, we talk about the deaths, but think about the injuries. Think about people who are going to be disabled for the rest of their lives. There was
Yeah.
one, yeah, there was one guy. I was reading his interview. It was crazy. They interviewed him after because they got him to the hospital, and when he woke up in the hospital, he was like, "What happened? Why am I in the hospital?" And they told him, "Oh, the plane you were on crashed." And he was like, "What plane? What are we?" Like he couldn't remember things that had happened over the previous day or even the previous few days. It had caused his brain had suffered some type of traumatic damage that immediately led to short-term memory loss. It wasn't like he woke up with amnesia like they do in sitcoms. He knew who he was. He knew what his job was, how old he was, things like that. But the past few days, gone out of his memory, and that must be terrifying to wake up and
Yeah.
not know where you are, why you're there. The events people are describing to you about your life and decisions you made, you're not familiar with. I mean, that would just throw me for a loop completely. And it remains to be seen what type of other issues they're going to find neurologically or physically as they give these people more scans and more examination following this traumatic event. So,
Yeah. One thing I do want to say specifically about the whistleblowers, you know what that just basically tells me, Chad? Specifically that like if they're coming out each couple months, even so it's a lot of them getting assassinated, it tells me how bad it actually is a situation. You know, it tells me how like how real sketchy Boeing is acting. Because if it's because for somebody to go that far, not only that they're good people, but also the fact that like if you're going that far to trying to expose them, knowing that you're gonna get, there's a good chance of you getting killed. In my opinion, that kind of shows you like whatever they're doing. That's even more than cutting corners is really really sketchy. So I just
absolutely.
wanted to at least say that.
No disrespect to the people of America, my home country, but if American workers are saying you guys are going too far with cheating and being lazy and saving money, you're too money hungry and lazy. If American workers are saying that, oh yeah, you've gone so far off the deep end, it's practically
Hmm.
irredeemable. Most companies have a certain amount of sketch that they're allowing people to do, and I mean, let's be honest, the average American company is super shady, the type of stuff they're doing and the type of harm they're causing people. But for the people who work on the inside to come out and say this is too far, I will risk my life to stop it. Yeah, I agree with you. It's got to be completely insane, even more than what we probably did get out from the whistleblowers. There's a reason they're still hitting
Exactly.
them, even though they've already said spilled the beans to some extent. Is because when they get up there and do their testimony, they must be really ready to say some crazy stuff. So if they're going to take them out like that, even though some stuff's already leaked, what we don't know has to be way worse than what we do know.
Exactly, 1000%. That's why I say like there's something going on that's brewing behind scenes that we don't know. I don't believe only just what they're telling us. I think it's way worse. I think that's probably just the tip of the iceberg, you know. So that's which is scary, honestly. If you really think it's really scary.
Definitely. Well, hopefully we find out some more soon. If you're a whistleblower, listen to this. Please come forward. We will give you full anonymity. So sorry, I stumbled over that for a minute. And we'll release everything you say. Even if you're lying to us, we'll go ahead and cover it for a second. But we just want to get information out there and make people more aware of what's going on behind closed doors. Thank you for listening again, guys. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you enjoyed this. And thank you again to our wonderful guests for dropping by and having this conversation with us.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. See you guys next week.
All right. Have a great day.